On several fronts in the coronavirus outbreak, Florida, Alabama, and North Carolina all reporting their deadliest days since the pandemic began. Much of California is shutting down all over again as it closes in on 340,000 infections. And the dire new warning today from the CDC director. The emergency order in New York, the one-time epicenter, what travelers from 22 states must now do or face a $2,000 fine. But how will it be enforced? President Trump in a new interview saying more white people are killed by police than black people in America, and his new defense of the Confederate flag. Just in, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg hospitalized. Her new health scare. Jeffrey Epstein's alleged accomplice facing a judge, Ghislaine Maxwell, entering her plea, and the major move today from the judge. The battle over going back to school, the big district recommending children return without masks or social distancing. Can you be reinfected by the coronavirus? The new research. Do antibodies protect you, and how long do they last?
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening, everyone, from Los Angeles. It's looking a lot like March in the nation's largest state tonight, nearly 4 months after Californians were first ordered to shelter in place. Closed signs are back up in places that had only recently reopened, all in a desperate effort to slow the spread of COVID. In those 4 months, deaths in California alone rising from just 18 to over 7,000. Rolling back restrictions, one of the few options left for states, as the head of the CDC today uttered a haunting prediction. We've got it all covered. Miguel Almaguer starts us off.
With California crippled by COVID, tonight the first state to order a sweeping shutdown, now becoming the largest to implement a massive rollback. The governor's new closures aren't just limited to indoor dining, bars, movie theaters, and churches. Most hair salons, malls, gyms, and non-critical offices, where millions work every day, must also shutter.
I just really hope that people are going to take it seriously. I don't know what it's going to take for people to understand.
The fifth largest economy in the world grinding to a halt again. The virus killing small businesses.
We can't close. If we close, we'll lose everything we have.
Facing economic disaster, California is in the middle of a health crisis. The state now averaging 8,000 new cases a day, more than double just a month ago. Hospitalizations are up 43% in 2 weeks as the death toll climbs to 7,000. More than 1/3 of all cases are in Los Angeles County.
We have never had as many people infected or infectious. We have never had as many recorded positive cases each day. And we've never had as many people in the hospital.
While LA's mayor could order additional closures, like the city's famed beaches and trails, the state is hoping to drive home its requirement for face masks, releasing this new PSA.
But not everyone is listening. Even in hard-hit states, some are refusing to enforce or require measures like face masks.
The mixed messages, say doctors, fueling the national rise in cases. California, Florida, and Texas alone approaching 1 million infections since the start of the pandemic.
I do think the fall and the winter of 2020 and 2021 are going to be probably one of the most difficult times that we've experienced in American public health.
But there are signs of progress. Biotech company Moderna will soon begin testing their trial vaccine on 30,000 patients. But help may not come soon enough for Moises Ramirez Loza, whose family is holding vigil on a sidewalk outside his room, where he's been on a ventilator for 10 days.
And when we do the rosary, he cries. When we talk to him, he cries. So we know he's still there. He shows those expressions. So we know he hears us.
Tonight, the cost of COVID impacting lives and livelihoods in devastating ways. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News, Los Angeles.
This is Sam Brock in Florida, which tonight set a record for coronavirus fatalities. 132 marks the highest number in a single day, fueling questions about what is happening in this state.
We're exploding because we didn't have a unified approach, and we didn't manage to convince our population of the serious risk.
Experts also point to a toxic combination of crowded beaches, packed protests, bustling bars, and people not wearing masks.
The amount of people who don't think they need to do something is enormous.
Here in Miami-Dade, where the positivity rate is around 25%, officials say multi-generational families living under one roof are seeing household infections spread out of control.
Younger people have been contaminating the older people.
Florida has been ripping right through its records for daily COVID cases. It has also been testing more than at any point in this pandemic. I'm in Miami Beach right now, where cars for testing line around the block. There's not enough time in the day to test all these people.
As he's pumped up testing and called for faster results, Governor Ron DeSantis has also pointed the finger at the state's agricultural workers, saying this last month.
You know, some of these guys, they go to work in a school bus, and they're all just like packed there like sardines.
Antonio Tovar represents Florida's Farm Workers Association.
Is there any evidence that it's the agricultural field that's driving this surge in Florida?
Not at all. The workers are not driving the surge of the pandemic.
Today, the governor's office telling NBC News the overall agricultural picking season is over, but migrants groups say they're still active. Tonight, Florida trying to get a grip on the crisis.
Our only option, unfortunately, at this time, since we haven't seen a turnaround in the last few days, despite these measures, is to enter another lockdown.
One option the state's leader, so far, has left off the table. Sam Brock, NBC News, Miami.
Now to New York, once the epicenter of the crisis with over 30,000 deaths. But tonight, to keep infection rates low, the governor is getting tougher about quarantines from travelers from hotspots. But can this crackdown be enforced? Here's Gabe Gutierrez.
New York's governor is billing it as a drastic move to stop the spread.
If you leave the airport without providing the information, you will receive a summons immediately.
Starting today, officers will meet passengers at New York airports. Those coming from 22 states designated as COVID hotspots now need to fill out these forms from the health department, providing contact information, or face a $2,000 fine. The state had already imposed a 2-week quarantine for those travelers, like Elle Hathaway of California, who's returning to Syracuse University next month.
They're trying to figure out a way to work with the governor and figure out like a safe, effective way, because realistically, they know kids are not going to be able to come back like 2 weeks early.
But with tens of thousands of people traveling here every day, can this actually be enforced? Last month, Governor Cuomo announced up to a $10,000 fine if a person entered the state without quarantining and spread the virus. So far, no fines have been issued in New York City. Months ago, Texas imposed its own 14-day quarantine for travelers from the Northeast. But today, Texas officials told NBC News they did not cite anyone, just conducted random spot checks.
Just by the sheer number of people that we would need to enforce this around the clock, 24/7, we just don't have that type of staffing.
Still, after 3 people returned to Warren County, New York from a vacation in Florida and tested positive, 46 residents are now on lockdown and being monitored.
We have 8 active cases of the coronavirus. If we had 200 active cases, it gets a whole lot harder and a whole lot more labor intensive.
The governor's office says travelers driving from hotspots must fill out the form online. Again, it's not clear how that will be enforced. Lester?
All right, Gabe, thank you. President Trump plunged back into the issue of police killings of black Americans today and also weighing in on the issue of the Confederate flag. The president making controversial comments about both. And Jeff Bennett has late details for us.
In a new interview with CBS News, President Trump called the killing of George Floyd by police terrible, but hit back when asked about the underlying issue of deadly use of force by police.
Why are African Americans still dying at the hands of law enforcement in this country?
And so are white people. So are white people. What a terrible question to ask. So are white people. More white people, by the way. More white people.
The president also defending the display of the Confederate flag.
You understand why the flag is a painful symbol for many people, because it's a reminder of slavery.
Well, people love it, and I know people that like the Confederate flag and they're not thinking about slavery. I just think it's freedom of speech, whether it's Confederate flags or Black Lives Matter or anything else you want to talk about. It's freedom of speech.
Those comments coming as the president faces fresh fallout over his coronavirus response in the form of an extraordinary rebuke from 4 former heads of the CDC, who argue in a new op-ed published in the Washington Post that the president and White House officials are attempting to undermine the agency's guidance for schools hoping to reopen in the fall. The condemnation from doctors Tom Frieden, Jeffrey Copeland, David Satcher, and Richard Besser comes as President Trump blasted the CDC's school reopening guidelines as very tough and expensive.
For guidelines to be issued by CDC and then undermined by the White House confuses everyone. The CDC guidelines are based in science. If we can't rely on that, where are we going to turn?
A White House official tells us in response that it's been working with the CDC in partnership since the very beginning of this pandemic. And they say they encourage all Americans to follow CDC guidelines. Lester?
Jeff Bennett at the White House tonight. Thanks. A late development this evening. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has been hospitalized for treatment of a possible infection. The 87-year-old justice underwent a procedure to clean out a bile duct stent that was placed last August. The court says she will stay in the hospital for a few days to receive IV antibiotic treatment. A federal judge today denied bail for Ghislaine Maxwell, the former girlfriend of Jeffrey Epstein, who was accused of sex trafficking young women for him. Stephanie Goss now with late details.
Bail denied. Ghislaine Maxwell will have to wait for her trial behind bars. The ex-girlfriend and longtime partner of Jeffrey Epstein pleaded not guilty and asked the court for a $5 million bail and home arrest in a luxury Manhattan hotel. The elusive 58-year-old appeared via video conference in a brown prison uniform.
Maxwell looked completely different than the pictures we're used to seeing of her on socialite pages. She had much longer hair. It was darker. It was back in a ponytail.
Though her defense team argued that the COVID pandemic made preparing for trial behind bars not realistic, the judge rejected the proposal, saying Maxwell poses substantial risk of flight. According to prosecutors, Maxwell was less than candid about her wealth. In court documents, investigators say she holds a Swiss bank account worth more than $4 million and a British account worth more than $2 million. Prosecutors say she took deliberate steps to avoid law enforcement, including wrapping her cell phone in tinfoil, what they called a seemingly misguided effort to evade detection. Her attorneys have argued that she took extra steps to avoid the media, not the police. One accuser told the judge Maxwell enjoyed drawing her victims in with perceived caring. Annie Farmer says she was 16 years old when she was sexually trafficked by Maxwell. She told the court by phone that Maxwell has lied under oath and torments her survivors. Maxwell's arrest has been met with hope and disbelief by other Epstein accusers.
I'm still trying to wrap my brain around her behind bars. There's part of me that, justice has already failed us a few times before in this situation, so I'm kind of just waiting for the other shoe to drop.
The trial is not expected to last long, about 3 weeks, but Ghislaine Maxwell will have a lot of time to think about it in her jail cell. Trial isn't set to begin until July of next year. Lester?
Stephanie Gosk in New York tonight. Thanks. In 60 seconds, the debate over reopening schools and the enormous challenges facing students, parents, and educators, and facts over fear, what experts now say about getting reinfected with COVID-19. With a debate raging over how to send children back to school safely, districts across the country are making their own plans tonight. Everything from online-only learning to in-person classes with no social distancing. Here's Blaine Alexander.
In Orange County, California, the divide runs deep. Some pleading keep students at home, while inside at a virtual school board meeting.
It's time to get these doors open and get these babies back to school.
The Orange County Board of Education agreed, recommending students in all 28 districts return to the classroom next month, no masks or social distancing required. A paper adopted and approved by the board slamming distance learning as an utter failure, frustrating to all, citing irregular attendance and disparities in access to technology. While the decision to reopen is up to each district, the board calls it critical to the well-being of our children, families, and communities. But to the north and south, both Los Angeles and San Diego public schools are going in a different direction, announcing the start of school will be online only, returning to the classroom as soon as public health conditions allow.
When in-person learning is possible, we're prepared for that. But quite frankly, in California, it's not possible right now.
From state to state, a patchwork approach, no uniformity even among neighboring districts. In Memphis, where parents can choose between virtual and in-person learning, more cleaning, masks for everyone, smaller classes, and scheduled hand washing.
It's going to cost millions of dollars. We've spent already
in the upwards of close to $50 million already to get schools up and going, but we're going to need more.
And while the majority of public education is funded at the state and local level, all eyes are on Washington for that extra boost. Congress approved more than $13 billion of aid for schools early in the pandemic. And in the next relief package, hundreds of billions more could be on the table.
And a lot of this also comes down to teachers and whether they are ready to come back. Here in Georgia, a survey by the state's largest educators association found that more than half of those responding do not believe their district has done enough to respond to the virus. Lester?
Blaine Alexander, thanks. Some key questions before schools reopen. Can patients who've had COVID get it again? And do antibodies provide protection? And if so, for how long? Our Tom Costello now with facts over fear.
29-year-old Carter Wright knows all too well the symptoms that come with COVID, the cough, the body aches, and the high fever.
At one point, I got cold packs and put them under my armpits because I read that helps cool you quickly.
He was first diagnosed in March. Then COVID came back even stronger on July 4th.
I cried hard that night because it was just super overwhelming.
Because you thought you were through with this.
Yeah.
Both times he tested positive. So why didn't the antibodies from the first infection protect him from getting it again? New research suggests that virus protection may not last long. British researchers say a study of 96 COVID patients found their antibodies peaked 3 weeks after the symptoms appeared, then rapidly declined. 3 months later, only 17% of those tested had the same level of antibodies. University of Alabama Dr. Michael Sagg was sick with COVID in March and still wears PPE. If antibody protection drops fast, he says, it could be a troubling development.
Because if that translates into someone possibly getting reinfected, that destroys the concept of what we have of herd immunity, where large numbers of people who have had it can ultimately extinguish the infection and put this behind us a little bit.
Researchers don't know if a vaccine's protection might also diminish over time.
What we do know is that a single experience with COVID does not render someone immune for the rest of their lives, and it may not make them immune for more than a few months.
Researchers believe the sickest COVID patients likely have more protection than those who are less sick. But because that protection may diminish over time, even recovered patients are encouraged to wear a mask. Lester?
Well, we keep learning so much about this virus, Tom, and so much of it isn't good. Up next, why COVID is hitting one community particularly hard. Back now with our series looking at inequality in America. As California shuts down again, Los Angeles County alone has more COVID cases than 44 entire states. And getting hit hardest there is the Latino community. Here's Gotti Schwartz.
Under the hot summer sun in Los Angeles, Teresa Lopez is selling masks on a street corner.
She said that everywhere that she was cleaning houses, they all told her that she wouldn't be able to come back until the pandemic was over.
Every day, her kids beg her not to go out, afraid she'll get sick, but she needs the money to feed her family.
She says that she gets mad when she sees somebody without a mask, but she doesn't want to say anything because people are very violent these days.
Her concerns about catching the virus are warranted. In Los Angeles, Latinos are more than twice as likely to get COVID-19 than white residents. And across the country, where Latinos make up 19% of the population, they account for a third of all cases. Frustrating for Dr. Efrain Talamantes.
Well, it's alarming.
He says the government isn't sending enough resources. Los Angeles.
Up next, one boy's inspiring shout out to the front lines. Before we go, in our latest episode of Nightly News Kids Edition, a 12-year-old who's lifting spirits on the front lines by holding impromptu concerts outside his local hospital. Plus, we'll meet an inspiring dance teacher and her students who are stepping in and stepping up despite the virus outbreak. Our new episode is streaming now. That is Nightly News. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'm Lester Holt. Please take care of yourself and each other. Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights,